3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, wherever you are in this world. And oftentimes on this journey, it is really special to be able to connect with spirits who you meet along the way within the intergalactic, people that long ago have given up the thinking mind, have been able to drop from the head to the heart into what I call the primordial gut, and be able to access the spirit mind, be able to dance, be able to be in nature, and most importantly, really just continue to cultivate self-love in order to be able to receive love. You have to be able to love yourself. And I got a chance today to speak to somebody who is a coach for many people. She takes on a lot of responsibility for other people. She tries to guide them towards their true nature, and is successful most of the time without taking on people's baggage and drama, and because then she is able to cultivate and sort of recharge her spiritual chi in order to inspire people to be themselves. Anamika Chrestenson, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake.
Anamika, can you tell me why you have credibility as a life coach?
Gosh, why do I have credibility? Well, the reason why I do have credibility is that I started my journey on the spiritual path and self-awareness and personal growth at a young age. I was 25 years old when my life, basically, I chose to kind of move out of the everyday world, and I chose to actually live in an ashram in Western Massachusetts for 10 years, and did a life of service where we did not get paid. We lived an incredibly monastic lifestyle. I did yoga 7 days a week. I was up at 4:30 in the morning, and yoga was at 5 with meditation and breath work. And I lived this lifestyle for 10 years. And so my path was completely very different from most 25-year-olds. And so I chose this path, and then came out of there after 10 years and developed my life path purpose as a holistic health practitioner, because I had studied all of this and learned from a living teacher. And so I lived this, and I did my own inner work. And then from doing all my own inner work, I then was in the world, and I was faced with worldly, experiences that most people go through. And because of all of my 10 years and of living this way, I was able to navigate easily and effortlessly through things in the world that were normal way of what we'd find as challenging or difficult. And, I was able to really be in it and see it as a place of growth and a place of further development, really. It was like the world was now becoming my ashram, my spiritual walk. And it was like I took my yoga from the mat, and I was walking in the world instead of laying on the mat and doing the postures. And so there's a difference, when you have done the inner work on yourself. It you have a knowing that you know that you know that you know, and no one can really shake that. And it gives you this peace. And I, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about, how you were able, before you went to the ashram, how you knew that how you were able to access your multidimensional self before you started to do your inner work?
Well,
I mean, did you know you had that ability to be a vessel and to be a conduit? If you got, I mean, or was your ego too invested, or was there too much trauma shrouding that?
no, from a child, I had an incredibly strong intuition about life, and just a strong intuition. And
What does that mean?
for me, my intuition is I can see people, and I can hear them, like hear when they're speaking and hear when they're not speaking. and I can see them when they're showing me one thing, but I am seeing something else. And so as a child, it was a little bit confusing, in the sense of, you're saying something else, but I'm feeling something else. And I remember I would tell this to my grandmother. And I would say things to my grandmother about people that she would be meeting, or people, and she'd be like, well, what do you mean? Or don't say that. And then later on, she'd come back to me and she said, and she'd ask me like what it was I was talking about. And she'd look at me, and I could see that she knew. And she would look at me and smile, almost like, yeah, I know who you like. I see you. And it was like this kind of, and then my grandfathers, both sets of grandmothers and grandfathers were brilliant, because I had them all. And I could speak to them all this way. And it was, yeah. So that's intuition. And it's just, you just know that and you trust, and you cultivate. Even if you don't trust, you start to cultivate your intuition by allowing what it is that you're sensing, and trusting that sensing, and know that it's coming from a place. And you can always check it, many ways to check your intuition.
But I mean, like, ultimately, I feel like when I see you, that there would have been a lot of opportunities for you in. I just wonder why you chose, or what was the catalyst for you to decide that you were going to live life by your own rules and not the rules that society says you should live by. I mean, you probably had the ability to do anything in the world, and society says you need to go out and you need to do this and you need to do that, and follow this linear path, and and some people get browbeaten for it, some people are encouraged to do it, and then there are people like you who at a very young age decide to go and to let everything fall away so you can find your true nature. And I'm not saying you're the only one that ever does that, but especially at your age, what was the catalyst for you to decide that you were going to live life by your own rules?
Beautiful question. So I did have a catalyst, and I need to make this really clear. But I trust the catalyst that originally brought me into living this way in an ashram. When I was in Europe, I actually met an American man. I originally was born in Jamaica and grew up in the UK.
Yeah.
So I was in Europe, and I met an American man, and we fell in love, and we chose to travel through the world, South America primarily. And then we came back, and I was living in the U.S., in Pennsylvania at the time, and he had started law school. So we were going down this path of I was going to be marrying the lawyer, and we were going to be having the 3 children or 4. And he did a year of law school, and we basically encountered. I started practicing yoga, and our yoga teacher happened to be living in an ashram that was about 40 minutes away from our home. We became incredibly good friends with this amazing human being, and we started to visit this smaller ashram that was close to us. And so whenever the teacher was going to be there, he would let us know, and we'd go up and we'd listen to the discourses. Mm. And after about my mate at the time he had finished a year at law school, and we had heard that they were buying a new property in Massachusetts because they had grown so large, and they were saying they needed help. And at that time we had been very involved in it. It was like a good year of just being involved in just the whole going up and listening to the discourses. So my partner at the time decided to, he said, I'm going to go up to Massachusetts and help them before, I have to go back to university, right? Law school. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, And so he goes up, and he completely has this whole revelation that he's going to take a year off law school, and we should go and live in the ashram. And at the time, it rocked my world in the sense that, wait a second, so if we go up there, we're not going to be living as a couple. That means that our relationship goes on hold for a year, because that was the plan. And so I was left with like, whoa, I was going through all the human emotions that one can imagine. In the sense, I was calm, but I was feeling like, I was feeling like, I think this is going to be the end of our relationship. And he was like, you've got to come up. You've got to, let's go and see it. Because he called me from when he was in Massachusetts, just what he was feeling. And then when he came home, he spoke to me, spoke to his family. His family definitely did not want this to happen. They saw it like he was going to be the lawyer. We were going to get married after law school was over, and we were going to start this amazing suburban, middle class, whatever lifestyle, if anything more upper middle class lifestyle. And, and then he also came from, quite an affluent family and, things of that nature. So you can imagine all the pressure that was put out. But, that did not happen. He chose that he was going to go. I told him I would spend a month alone so that I could decide. I would spend a month in our house alone while he goes up, and I need to make a decision without any of him influencing me.
Absolutely.
So that was what happened. He went, and then I was with myself, and of course his family would interject with me and come and see me, and they would be like, don't do this, don't feel you have to do this because of him. Don't feel you can't take care of yourself because he's now not around. We will completely take care of you financially on all levels, I'm like, this wasn't what it was about, It was me needing,
Sure.
This was not finance. This was about me sitting with my gut feeling, intuition, going inside. What is this for me? Is this what is being called? And these were the catalysts that brought me from Europe so that I could go into this now place of living a monastic lifestyle. and it wasn't for what I thought it was, which was to marry this man and to have his children, and for us to live this beautiful married life, right? And I told him, I was thinking, oh my God, this could be a catalyst for me. So I said, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to do 6 months. That was the commitment. And after 3 months, I was like, no, this is what I will be doing, and I will be doing this until I feel it is no longer what I need to do. So that's what the catalyst was. That's how I got there.
How did the relationship resolve itself? I mean, did he expect the same thing that you did going in, being that you felt like it was going to be the end, or did he assume that you guys would reconnect after some time in solitude?
Yeah, even although I intuitively felt that this was going to be the end, my mind while I was there kept thinking, oh yeah, we're going to connect, we're going to after a year, maybe, he's going to leave and maybe we're going to both leave. And then that did not, he thought he was going to be there for a year. And the intention was that we both were going to be there for a year. And then our relationship would reconnect and we'd move out and we'd go back to law school and we'd live this life that we originally had thought was going to be for us. And that did not happen, because after a year, Russ decided that he was not going back to law school. Wow. And he also told the teacher, because the teacher knew that he had taken a year off, and said, yeah, that could be a good idea to take a year off. But he didn't even ask the teacher what to do. He just went up and shared in front of everyone and said, I am not going back and I will be staying here. And that's also how I learned, in a big discourse, and we could go and share. And he shared that. And when I heard him, I was like, I felt relaxed. I felt, I didn't feel any tension within me. I didn't feel any animosity or anything. I felt like, yeah, I still want to live here. And, but I think after a year and him stating that, I definitely felt that, most likely the relationship was going to be over. And then it, eventually I think it became more official after about 3 years that the relationship was not going to be happening. And, yeah.
I mean, fundamentally, like, were you somebody that you were okay with, being the going, before the ashram became too hard to too gravitationally strong to pass up? I mean, were you content, or were you looking forward to the traditional domestic role of not that you wouldn't have had a dynamic life, but were you looking forward to the more traditional role of the family, or did you feel like, I mean, in hindsight, I guess I'm asking, did you recognize that you were, because I've talked to so many healers and spiritualists who, a lot of it, to me, it comes down to, they were with somebody, it was committed, they were ready to, they had sort of said, okay, this is the cat, and I'm going to have their children, or I'm going to have children with them, and then they literally started having like panic attacks because they, for whatever reason, their life force and inner constitution was fully rejecting that, and I just wonder,
No, I didn't. No, I didn't have any of that. Start to interrupt you, Eric. But no, that wasn't how mine was, for sure. Because I definitely thought when we were together, my partner and I definitely was, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be the wife and I'm going to have the children. And, I grew up with that. I grew up with, grandmothers having lots of children, my mom and dad, having, a lot of us. And so, coming from that traditional sort of, Jamaican Brit kind of thinking of just like family and children. And so I was completely going to go down that path because I never thought it would interrupt any of my intuition or
I dig.
any,
No,
any
you're
of that.
spot on. You're spot. I mean, you're also like incredibly bright. I mean, I'm just like astonished with how well spoken you are. I mean, not that I didn't think that, but it's just. I mean, do you feel like you ever have you ever dealt with anxiety ever in your life, or have you always been somebody who has been very patient? I mean, impatience is the enemy of aspiration, and so I wonder about and I wonder about your clients today, especially women who we don't. Populations are shrinking in most of the world. People are having
Yeah.
many less children.
Oh.
There's a major crisis in a lot of countries, and it's amazing because, like you said, your parents had many kids, your grandparents did. Families have gotten smaller and smaller, but there's something there and so somehow that relates back to impatience or this idea of, people that say, well, I need to be married by this age. I need to have kids by this age. I mean, it's this all sort of mapped out sort of neurotic thing. And if they don't have that in line, then all of a sudden they feel a little bit wayward. And I wonder how often you can talk authentically to your clients about the fact that, ultimately, like you looked deep within your intuition and instinct and recognized that this path of mindfulness and solitude and the ashram, it was going to take up a large chunk of your life, in some ways a decade, but yet it was important for salvation and peace, and you didn't take a mainstream route, and you don't have any regrets about it. Because some people would just look at it in a timeline and say, you're nuts, you're 25, you need to do these things. And do you talk to people about taking a non-conventional path as a life coach?
So I'm going to go back to your first question, which was, do I ever suffered from anxiety? And the answer is no. I have not had anxiety.
Yeah, no, I can tell. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
But I do know of anxiety because I have had friends who've had anxiety. And so I've covered that. At 25 to choose to go that route, knowing that that's the age when you start to think about getting married and having children. And, I did take that route. And
well, just for the audience, it's like, I mean, you met somebody that, you guys had a simpatico. There was a lot of, security and resources. You were set. I mean, basically it was the safe. I'm not saying it was like, it was like anybody. If it'd be one thing if you were like, oh, I'm not really into this cat, and I feel pressure though. But again, you literally were like, I'm just going to go and take the insecure path and thrive in that, which is totally liberating and inspiring to hear. And I just wonder if you if you going back to my original question about, because you can live an incredibly authentic life, but that doesn't make you a great coach per se. But I just wonder if you talk to your clients or work with them on being, on telling them that they can believe and know that it's okay to take the insecure path.
Absolutely. You know, working, and I chose specifically to work with women because I know women and I am a woman. And I know the fears and the insecurities that women have, and also that society have also, you know, put on them in the sense of the marriage and when they can have children and how many children they want and when to start. And so, yes, I do speak to women, and I do think it's important for women to be authentic and to really feel that whatever choice they make along this journey for themselves, that it's a choice that they are making with full accountability, whatever happens.
That's right.
So if a woman chooses that I am going to first do education and career, and then maybe at 33, 35, I'm going to, like, in 1 year meet a man, and then and then another year later we're going to get married, and then, oops, I have time to have maybe two children. That's a choice they've made. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pan out the way they thought, because life happens. They may not meet someone in a year or 2 or 3 that they choose to get married to or want to get married to. And then, you know, they are the ones who take the, you know, basically they're taking the gamble, and they're like, and I'm talking like this because this is what I hear. I'm going to, you know, I am going to, like, really just choose that I want children, and I also want to be a stay-at-home mom. And I am going to put every effort or more effort into obtaining and meeting my spouse. Or I'm going to put as equally amount into meeting my spouse as I am into my career. And I want to get married, and I may want to be a stay-at-home mom, and that I'm okay with. And some women may feel that it's not okay, or they feel a little bit like, well, is it all right for me to want to have children and want a husband, and then afterwards want to be a stay-at-home mom? So we have these two categories of women who are wanting marriage, and one feels that they're going to put more effort, or an equal amount of effort, into obtaining and attracting a husband, and maybe be a stay-at-home mom, and feel no shame about that. And then you have the other set of women who are like, I'm going to do the career, education first, and yes, I want a husband, and yes, I want to have children, but I'm not going to be equally putting that same effort as I am going to be doing in my career. And then they realize that they're making a gamble, and they're hoping that the chips are going to fall at an age that they can actually have the education, have the career, have the husband, and have the children in this lifetime. And sometimes it doesn't happen, because we do have to make choices. And we do only, as women, have a certain amount of window of time to have children.
Yeah, see, I disagree. I mean, I just would say that, like, I believe that, I know that's what literature, science says, but I do believe that certain people, women, can have children much older than what society says. Do you believe that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Children. Women can have children. They don't have to be having it just in their 20s. They don't have to be. But once you do hit between the age of like 35 and maybe even 45, that's like your window.
Yeah, but I just I am under the belief that in just spiritual. I mean, you're going to tell me. I know that your grandma had children in her 50s.
You know, God, let's see.
Yeah, I know. Or late.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like
I think
grandma.
Grandma didn't have I think grandma had. I think my grandmother on my mom's side had her last child in her 40s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just say, I mean, that's the ideal window, but the idea that you can't. I don't know. I know people say you're more susceptible to things and you're not as healthy or the eggs, whatever it is. It's like I'm very much like. Well, anyway, we have a game. Go ahead.
I like where you're going with that, and
you know what it is, because it's like what, like, I mean, I just feel like, okay, yeah, there's like you said, there's a gamble in almost anything that you do in life. Like you have to take chances to push yourself, and it's like, if men, I mean, I have 2 daughters, and I really, I would love to have 6 or 7 kids, and I just feel like if guys are capable of, helping create children, in their 60s and 70s, you see that all the time, and they're with younger women, but I would feel that like it's easy to, I mean, I think women can physically still, become pregnant in their 50s, and I think most of the time it would work out just fine. That's just the way I'm looking at it, is that, somehow there's this, that's in, and again, believe me, I understand that there are factors involved, but still, I feel like that pressure of saying, well, I only, once I'm this age, I can't have a baby anymore. That to me strikes me as limiting. You should not limit yourself,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to absolutely live with great possibility and out of a box, but there are certain things which it's like saying a woman at 70 can have children.
That might be a little bit. That might be a little bit old. That might be a little bit old. But I mean, like the woman becomes, the woman is like growing into like she's in divinity at 50 years. In my mind, at 50, that's like divine. That's like the most divine place you could possibly be. And
absolutely
70, that, I mean, that might be a little too much, but I mean, I mean, I just, you know what it is? It's beautiful. And I think that, well, I'm already very inspired by you. And we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I don't expect you to know who this is, but pay attention to the content, and then we'll come back and break it down.
All right.
We're all part of each other, and society today, I mean, those days in the early 70s, there was a general more attitude that we could make a better world. I mean, we really made a hash of it, because the hippies became the yuppies, and the yuppies became the investment bankers. And the investment bankers.
You're right. You're right.
And they ruled by greed. They became infected by greed, and greed runs society today. The problem with greed is that you fall into this illusion that you can do this and do that without affecting other people. The thing is, everything we do affects the people around us, because we're all connected. From a spiritual point of view, we all know we're all connected. There's only the Great Spirit, and we're just aspects of the Great Spirit. But in fact, I would go further than that, and I would say that we're actually all physically connected insofar as that a bank folds in frozen sneakers, Idaho, and that actually affects me. It affects you. It affects everybody in some way. And when you have a lot of that happening, like for example the meltdown in 2008, which was the cause of which was entirely greed, then you have a global effect that affected millions of lives. Millions of lives. Millions of people lost their homes. They lost everything. Their jobs. I mean, it's phenomenal. So we have to bear in mind that I want to bear in mind that I'm connected to everybody and everything that I do affects everybody and everything. So, but these are questions that I started addressing, in the late '60s, and so you just that's what your life's about. That's what my life's about, anyway. It's a question of course, my voice, really my main voice is music, because in music we can say things that are essentially unspeakable, but they relate directly to the human condition. And my human condition is exactly the same as yours, exactly the same as everybody else's. Here I am in the spirit, in this body, and what do we do when we play? And what can we possibly say? And the only story really we have is the story of our life and how we look at life around us and the people around us, and what kind of relationship do we have with ourselves, our deeper self, and with our immediate people around us, and the world at large. And actually, if you take it further, to the universe, what kind of relationship do you have to the universe? And, all these are all ways of figuring out how to live a happy life.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, we haven't, how much of a music fan are you, by the way? I just was curious about because that was my fourth interview. I mean, on the last decade, I have been, on my path. It's very similar to you in the ashram at that time, in the sense that I've basically been just going on spirit and then just being a relentless rogue journalist, and not going into some sort of paradigm where I have other people telling me questions I need to ask, or I'm not. I've just sort of carved out my own niche, and that was an interview, my fourth interview with Mahavishnu John McLaughlin. Do you know him? I will send you. But, and it's okay. I mean, Yeah. The reason I play this for you, that clip was very poetic, but the story is so classic, and I'll try to be very brief. I mean, he was a great jazz guitarist and studio player in England, and then he was invited to the United States and by Tony Williams, who was Miles Davis's drummer. And then the next day he got to the States, he was on the famous album In a Silent Way. But so he became this. And in any event, he was doing hard drugs, not psychedelics, not pot, but he was probably doing coke and harder drugs, and he. He really wanted to reach a spiritual plane on the bandstand and in life without accessing hard drugs. And he was in New York, and it was a very intense place, and in the early 70s, and he found the ashram that was run by Sri Chinmoy. And Sri, so John at that point was becoming integrated into the music scene, and he started a band called the Mahavishnu Orchestra, very famous band, okay? And they got signed to a record label, Columbia Records, and they started to tour. all right? And John was living at the ashram, learning bhakti yoga. He was going to the Sufis and dancing with them, but he was, trying to, learn about himself. And yet he was accessing this plane of musical success. They were having commercial success. They were going on tours. They had a record deal. And Sri Chimnoy said to him, Mahavishnu, the disciples here at the ashram need to eat. So I need you to open an Indian restaurant. And so he opens this Indian restaurant, and he learns to cook Indian food when he's not on tour, vegetarian, South Indian food. And for $1.50 a plate, he would serve the disciples who were living at the ashram. And at the end, about a year and a half in, he said, because the Mahavishnu Orchestra kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was taking up a lot of his time. And he, at a certain point, he said to Sri that he could not handle the responsibility anymore. And Sri said, I think you have learned the point of keeping both feet on the ground and recognizing that you are no bigger than anybody else, and that monetary success and stardom and fame, none of that stuff really matters. And I wanted to, this was a test to see if you could, just put one foot in front of the other. And, to know what a kind of person John is, and to have connected with him and to have done such deep interviews with him was so rewarding for me. And yet I'm still on that path of trying to find my own, I'm on my path, but the discipline is remarkable, and I wonder about the service. You talked about service, providing when you were in the ashram and for 10 years, and I wanted to know about how deep your dedication was, and how you changed your world and affected change in your world to create and inspire other people without feeling it being an obligation or a duty, or that you were restrained, but that you surrendered. That you surrendered.
Yeah. My years in the ashram were in the spiritual community was really a time of service, and
Right.
I saw that.
What did that look like? What did service look like at that time for you?
Well, service was the greater good of the community, and that this community was about really designed to also serve the outside world. It wasn't just the people living there. It was also a center of personal development where people came from all over the world to do personal development courses, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's learning about movement, whether it's about your self-awareness, and it was filled with these gems that was there to help people transform their lives so that they are better in the world. And I knew and I saw that we needed people in the world who had more awareness about who they are, and they could go into the world. And if it takes one person to go into the world and shed a little bit more light and love on 10 people's life, and those 10 people affect another 10 or one person, it's this beautiful ripple effect. So that was the way I saw it, and I saw the need for people to really spend time with themselves. And the people who were living there in the community, we were basically there to provide this service, not just to ourselves, but to all the people who would come there. So we would have people who were administrators, we would have people who were teachers, we would have people who were the gardeners, we would have people who were the housekeeping, in the whole, people who were in the holistic health department, like myself. I was in the health health service department where I did massages and shiatsu, and I taught movement and yoga. So that was my department. My first 2 years, though, I wasn't in those. My first 2 years, when I got there, I was doing the kitchen work, and I was helping to coordinate, like the salad bars and the breakfast.
Wow.
And I had a team of people who I had to train, and I trained myself. I just knew how naturally to be in a kitchen. And so, and the people there are incredibly intuitive, because they saw me and they're like, oh, yeah, Anamika would be good at that. And so they just took their intuition and moved with it, and I moved with it. And at a young age, I was pretty dynamic and had a lot of energy, and so it was beautifully directed into this work. And I did that for 2 years, and and then they had a training for the staff in yoga, the people who lived there in yoga, and they had their own style of yoga and in massage. And I did the first training in the massage, and about, not even halfway, about quarter way into the training, the teachers, and I was natural at it, and teachers were like, this training is over, you're going into the health department, you are a natural. Wow. And so pretty much I finished the training, and they took me out to the kitchen and put me into the health service department. And then, and then I did the movement and the yoga, and then I also did that. So I was doing both the health services and the movement and yoga. And so
no, you did it. I mean, that's so beautiful. And when ultimately, what have you carried to this day as it relates to service to mankind?
Mm. Got you.
I see.
Got you.
Yeah. Well, no, because I'm not saying that you don't get irascible or feisty or fired up. Because we all do. But when I see your eyes, it seems to me like the gift of unconditional love, and I think that that is something that is very fleeting for me. It feels so good when I feel that way, but I feel like because you've cultivated your true nature for so long at that time, that is your superpower is unconditional love. And I wonder if that is what you've carried through to this day.
Oh, thank you for that. I pray that I continue to move into that, because for me, that is what it is about. It is about unconditional love, and being a coach and is to be able to see each person and meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
And meet them where they're at, and also have the insight to know and to see the greater purpose also of their lives.
And you were able to do that with very little information on people, right? I mean, you can kind of, your intuition and instinct is so good that you can, you're not a prophet, but well, I think you might, maybe you are a Sufi maybe.
No, I'm not. I definitely don't want to say any of these things. Please, I am.
You know what it is, though. But here's the thing. You know what it is. The bottom line is that the right word is mystical. There's a mystical quality to you, to your lineage, and I wonder if you have been back one thing I started my show interviewing a lot of black musicians from the 40s and 50s because I was perplexed at the time, 32 years old. I thought we were living in a post-racial society, and then Barack Obama got elected, and everything got turned upside down, and I just was trying to educate myself as to the cultural bias in this country, and I started to reach out to a lot of my elders, really shaman musicians, and getting stories on the record about the cultural bias. Some people would call that racism that persists not just in this country but around the world. And I just wanted to ask you, one thing that I've learned. I mean, I have not read books. I've been educated by people, and I wonder about. Well, what I realized is that we get taught in school about that civilization began with the Greeks and the Romans, but in fact it started in the motherland of Africa. The first universities were there. The first medicines were developed. All the instruments were developed there. And it is a land of incredible resources and beauty, continent. And I was wondering if you have ever been back. Have you been to the motherland?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to back up a little because my brain tends to work this way.
Sure.
I want to complete something first, and then I'll definitely go into the lineage and motherland, which is, to be of service and to be a life coach to women. It is about unconditionally holding space for my clients and these amazing human beings and these beautiful souls. Oh no, they know what they know, and they know what's right for them. And so I hold a space and just let them speak. And eventually, when you listen really well, the people come to their own knowing and their own truth, because that truth is within all of us. We just have to have someone who can really listen and maybe give little steps and be an accountability partner along this journey, so that the accountability person holds you to what you know that you desire and wish for your life. I wanted to really touch on that.
I love that.
The other part is lineage. Lineage does, I can speak for me. My lineage plays a big role in my life because I know who I am. I have never allowed society and biases and fear of, I call it the European fear. I don't call it, some people call it white supremacy. There's really nothing supreme about any of that. Mm-hmm. It's just fear when somebody goes into that. So I see the European fear as fear. And so knowing that and knowing who I am from a very young age, I was never caught in that feeling of lack and deficiency and feeling like any other nation was greater than me. I knew I knew my lineage, I knew who I am, I knew my people. And because of that, it gave me amazing strength and amazing confidence. And I could walk into the world and be in the world, and I can see people for who they are. And so yes, my lineage plays a big part, and it gives me, and that's why I have a lot of self-love, and I know how to do self-care.
Yeah.
And I know how to inspire and to help others to come into a place of self-love and to have self-care. And the land of Kush, the land of Africa,
Kush.
I have not been there yet. the land of Kush. Kush means, the land of the burnt people, black people. Well, burnt people.
Yeah, no,
Niger.
Dizzy Gillespie had a great song called Kush.
Yeah,
It's just like, it's like so. I remember Jimmy Heath, great tenor player, rest in peace, and he would say, you grow up in this country, and you think African people are like, you watch TV and they're Tarzan, and they're loud, and they're barely clothed, and you get brainwashed. And then he had a chance to go there in the late 70s, because the one American art form that was created in this country would be known as jazz, and people like Jimmy Carter would send over Dizzy and Jimmy Heath and on these State Department tours to show off this music that was created by Black America, even though it was never supported in this country. They would send them overseas, and they talk about. I've done so many interviews with these elders who, they go to Dakar, and then they get there, and the stadium is packed with thousands of people, and they play, and they end the song, and there's no clapping, there's no yelling, and Jimmy realized that he's been brainwashed by this country too, as to who African people really are. This beautiful land of invention and rhythm and culture. And yet, and we're talking about somebody who's grown up in the 50s and the 60s, but still, what is caricatured in this country, it's so easy to believe that that's who your people are. And then you get to Africa and you see that, in fact, it's nothing like the way it's portrayed here,
Well, I will touch on to that, but
I guess what I'm saying, the better question is the better question is.
No,
is
what
that,
you're saying, I love it. I'm going to come to that.
Okay, go ahead.
But I want to definitely address that. I have not been to Africa yet, but I have been planning. I actually was going to go to Ghana last year before all this, the COVID happened. I was going to go there, and England, and then to Ghana. But so it's completely on my radar, and it's the big plan to definitely go.
Because I see. You look like your face looks like almost like a each village has their own wise people or teacher. You look like you look like somebody just like that, very much. That's when I first saw you indigenous to the motherland. Very, very much. That's the way I feel. You say that you had self-love, self-care. You grew up with a family of people that modeled that for you, so you never lacked that. Am I reading that correct? So when society would come at you with European shame, European bias, or whatever, it didn't affect you because. Can you talk about some of the unconditional love that you were shown as a growing up?
Well, like I said, I was lucky to grow up with two sets of grandmothers and two sets of grandfathers who were just brilliant, amazing human beings. Those are definitely my first teachers, or my grandparents.
Yes.
They really, they would allow me to speak and they would listen.
Exactly. No, I love it. It's so beautiful.
Because it was like,
Yeah, you were in your own world. Sure, yeah.
Yes, and, and then growing up on this beautiful, being born in Jamaica and growing up like 300 meters from the ocean, and, family are into the fishing business, and you ate everything fresh, and
man.
you didn't grow up with fast food. I didn't know what fast food was, because in the town we grew up on, everything grew, and we just ate from the ocean or from the the fruit or veggie markets, and
What? Hold on. I just want to stop.
did.
I want to stop. I got to ask you because my favorite Jamaican meal is goat and oxtail. Was that stuff you ate too? You know, like I'm not. I don't eat a lot of seafood, but I mean, there's a couple restaurants here and there. I can't stop eating that goat and oxtail. It's incredible.
Well, goat and oxtail is not seafood, as you know.
That's right.
But
right.
you know,
Yes.
but growing up occasionally, we would have, you know, particularly more goat meat, and it was more curry goat.
Yeah.
You know, with rice and veggies, and it's a classic Jamaican
Of
meal. It's
course,
one
of
of the
course,
many
you gotta
classical
have that.
Jamaican
It's so
meals.
beautiful. So
Yeah.
it was all very
Yeah.
So you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
But
interrupt.
I was
Yeah.
mainly, sorry, but I grew up mainly, I would say, with fish, just because my family was in the fishing business, and so, you know, fish was mainly what we, and occasionally we would have the goat. So yes, I had people modeling to me self-love and knowing who they are, and telling me, you know, grandparents telling me how amazing we are as a nation, as a black nation. So, and growing up in Jamaica, where the majority of the people are looking like me. So when you have a reflection around you, predominantly looking like you,
Right.
you are going to have a completely different understanding of who you are than, for example, than the black people in the United States, where predominantly they don't necessarily have people in charge that look like them. Whereas in Jamaica, the predominant people who were in charge and running the country looked like me. And so that makes a big difference. And then the imagery that is shown on the media around them, because the imagery in the media influence the people, but not just the black people, it influenced all the other nations of people. So the European, particularly the European nation in America, saw themselves as the ones in charge because that's what the media said. And the movies were predominantly showing them. Everything showed them. So they thought that they were fantastic and they are, you know, God's gift to the world, you know?
Yes.
And so that's what occurred. And so now back, you know, here we are in the, 2021, you have a world where people are saying, no, we have knowledge, because before there was a lack of knowledge about who you are. When you have a lack of knowledge of who you are, you suffer. Now there's knowledge and there isn't a lack. So people of the African nation are waking up. A lot of them are awake and they know who they are, and they are moving very strong and knowing that. And it's beautiful to see, and some of them are looking to even go back to Africa and knowing that they can live their ideal lives, whether they stay here, whether they go back to Africa, or whether they go somewhere else. But either way, they know who they are now, and the lie is being exposed, the deceit and the deception, the veil has been opened.
It's beautiful. I mean, I gotta play another Name That Voice for you, and take a listen to this, and then we'll come back.
Thank you.
When the owners of the plantations, decided that this was the way that they were going to make their money. They were going to be farmers, and they were going to have thousands of acres of land. But who to work all of that? They couldn't work it by themselves. Okay, and they couldn't hire their next door neighbor because their next door neighbor was also a wealthy aristocrat.
Right.
So who did they get to work? Well, the closest people that to them were the lower class whites. You know, the ones who weren't aristocrats. You know, who needed a job. So get them to work. Put them to work. Put them to work on those fields. All right. Problem number one. The sun was blistering hot. Okay, they didn't have sunblock back then. Okay, and they were just not suited for working under the hot sun for so long. Okay, I mean, coming from the climate that they came from, they were not used to anything like the sweltering, blistering heats that they were subjected to work in the cotton fields and tobacco fields and the rice paddies. So there was a problem. Okay, they were dying. They were dying off. They couldn't make it. They just couldn't make it. All right. So look around some more. Who do we have? There's Native Americans. Yeah, let's get the Indians to do it. They're used to the weather, and you know, we got them under our thumb right now, so let's do it. So they bring the Native Americans in. Only one problem, okay? Every tree was a safe house for a Native American. Every hill, every mountain, okay, every trench was a safe house for those Native Americans in that area who knew that land. I mean, this was their land. They knew it. They understood it. They communed with it. They communicated with it. You know, you could not keep them there. Okay? They knew where to hide. They were into guerrilla warfare before America didn't learn really about guerrilla warfare until it went to
Vietnam.
Vietnam, yeah. Okay, so that wasn't going to work. But there was another thing. Guys over in Europe, man, were shipping these guys from Africa. They were shipping slaves over from Africa, and they were making a fortune down in the islands, you know, down in the Caribbean, and in South America. They were making a fortune. Why can't we do that? Let's do it. Let's get these Africans in these ships over here and start working them. Okay, because here's the thing: get them. They're all from different areas. They speak different languages, different tongues, and different dialects. Okay, they're well suited for the heat. Okay, and they have no idea where they are. Perfect. Let's get them. So, slave trade began. They started shipping over the slaves to work, the Africans to work the fields. But there was a crossover. There was a time where forget the Indians, they were gone.
Right.
Okay, they were out. But there was a time when the European indentured, what they called indentured servants, okay, were also working alongside the African servants. Okay, and the reason I say what we have to understand is that indentured servitude meant that, okay, yeah, you weren't getting paid, okay, to do the job, but there were two things that could happen to an indentured servant that would not generally happen to a slave. First of all, an indentured servant worked for a certain period of time. Okay, it was like a prison sentence. You, after your time was up, you were free. Okay, and the other thing is that once you were free, your children, there was no stigma attached to being the child of an indentured servant. Okay, because who knew? Nobody could really tell. There was no way of telling. Okay. However, as an African servant, as an African slave, there was no possibility of you gaining your freedom under ordinary circumstances. And second of all, your children look like you. So it was common. I mean, it was common knowledge that you had to have not come from here, and you have not come from. You were obviously a descendant of an African,
Right.
who at some point was a slave. So you were always marked with that just by your appearance. So it's very easy to keep track of. They were very easy to keep track of. And because they were easy to keep track of, they were also easy to compartmentalize. Okay, socially as well as physically. So what happened? The indentured servants and the slaves were working on these plantations for these rich, wealthy aristocrats. I think he said that there were maybe 200, like late in the 18th century into the early 19th century. There weren't that many, in other words. Okay,
right.
And they were wealthy beyond belief already, and they were getting to be more wealthy because of the crops that they were growing. They were both being treated very poorly. Okay, so much so that they used to talk about it. They used to get together and say, "Hey, wait a minute, hold on, just a minute, okay? They're doing the same thing to us. All right, maybe you're in the house, or maybe you're in the field, or whatever. But you know what? These guys have got their foot on our back, and we need to take our freedom back." And they got together, and they started organizing against these wealthy landowners. Okay. It was at that point that there had to be a strategy, because out of the few rebellions, the few interracial rebellions that occurred, it became obvious to the wealthy aristocrat, that they were going to have to divide and conquer. They were going to have to send indentured servants from the African. Okay.
I just want to be clear. In my own, so indentured servants could not include anybody that came via diaspora. These were white.
It could, but basically, I'm sure under extraordinary circumstances, one could become an indentured servant and be an African descendant of an African.
Right.
Right. But that was primarily a role that had been fulfilled by Europeans who had been either were in a class that was needy, or that was dependent on the upper class.
I got it. Yeah.
They were convicted of some type of crime. This is what my understanding.
First of all, thank you for that. That story went on for that. That was Brian Jackson. I don't know. Are you hip to the poet Gil Scott Heron? He passed away.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian and him went to Liberty University in Pennsylvania together. They were best friends, and for 10 years they wrote some of the baddest music ever. Okay, and he goes on to talk about the interracial rebellions, how it became a threat to the aristocrats. They wound up saying to the indentured servants, listen, if you work the land long enough, then after a certain amount of years, you can actually get some land of your own. You're still going to be poor, but at least you won't be like them, meaning black, the slave. And, so you only hear about the abolitionists like John Brown, because he was white. Okay. You don't hear about all the black. So education is a major kind of, and it's impossible in a Judeo-Christian society, which is predicated on guilt and shame. The initial thing is, this is what went down. And then most of white America will say, "Oh my God, I can't look. It feels too bad. I need to go get a I need to go get a manicure. Leave me alone. Like I can't handle this reality." Okay, and when I I know you didn't sign up for this, and you don't wear it as a badge of honor, but my larger question is that, where do you think the right place to start is? I talk to my older daughter about it all the time. You have to acknowledge the truth. You have to acknowledge the fact that, there was 40 acres and a mule that was promised to emancipated slaves that never happened. Okay, we know about all the other stuff. We know so much, and yet first you acknowledge the truth, then you try to rectify the situation or make amends for it, knowing it's never going to be perfect, and then ultimately, then you try to move into the future in a more positive or just a more honest way. And I ask you, where do you think the best place to start is? I just sort of feel like it's a big pull. It's a big haul, but like reparations, and greed is so insane right now. So that's not like a panacea, but I really look at you as somebody like, I feel like you have many chapters left to write in this life, and I feel like one of them is, you don't necessarily have to be at the forefront, just your life force and who you are and how I feel how strong you are, that you can be. I ask you, what is the best place to start? Because, and I think it's all predicated on the fact that the baby boomers need to exit stage left so that like our generations can kind of come in but where do we start? In your mind, where do we start?
Yeah, beautiful, really beautiful question. And I love hearing, and I will get back to that. I always like to touch on what it is that we just listened to.
Please.
What,
yeah.
This fellow was talking about. I don't know how many people really do know about Bacon's rebellion, which was like in 1675 through 1676.
That's right.
And Bacon Rebellion was this amazing, where they were, because you have to understand, a lot of people don't realize that white was invented around that time. There was never before white.
Absolutely.
There was only Europeans, right? And you're Irish, you're Italian. So when the Bacon Rebellion started, was those Europeans who were brought in, quote unquote, working class Europeans were brought in to basically work alongside the Africans who were enslaved, and they lived together, and they actually even had relationships with each other, and they formed this friendship. And then they realized that the aristocrats were not really doing them well, and they came together and formed like an army against the aristocrats, and they were doing really, really well together as a team. And
it was very effective, absolutely.
It was incredibly effective, and what happened was the aristocrats realized, hearing from England what was going on, they came up with this whole thing of, let's create a separation, and basically the white race was formed, and now the people who are not even considered in their minute of thinking with these aristocrats to could be even considered white, I'm just fast forwarding so that I can get people up to speed.
Of course.
This whole thing called white was invented as a political means to separate the Africans from the Europeans who were fighting against them. And we were going to basically, you were not going to be working with them anymore. You were now going to be the overseer of these Africans, and you are now a white race, as just like how we are now aristocrats, a white race, but the aristocrats never saw these people in the same light, but they fooled these people to think that they were now equal to the aristocrats because they are now in a category called white. And that was what that rebellion was about. And that's how the white race got invented as a political means of establishing power and separating people.
And let's also be clear. I mean, because I didn't get really let you know about this in advance. I mean, I've devoted so much of my show to diaspora and
Yes.
the drum and rhythm and here's the bottom line. You can riff on this any way you want, but before they categorized skin color, when the slaves came and the Louisiana Purchase was when they came to the port cities down in the South, it was first and foremost Christianity. They said, we are superior because we are Christians. And they looked at the displaced Africans and they said, if they were Christian, their skin would be white. So they are subhuman. And so they cut out their tongues and they wouldn't let them speak their native language. And if a slave was caught with a drum, they'd have their hands cut off. So what you were just talking about before so beautifully, like maybe half hour ago, about not knowing, Black Americans not understanding where they came from because they were separated, because everything was taken, their native culture, as best as they tried to keep it intact, they couldn't. They couldn't because they were considered subhuman because they weren't Christian. And then, the word white came in as well as a separator. So I mean, this. I mean, and even as a little girl, when you were, preaching to your grandparents, and they were like, you are, and they would listen to you and give you feedback. I wonder about before you get into the how to heal or how to solve this issue. I just on my journey, I've interviewed musicians and healers and spiritual people from all over the world and all different, creeds and religions, ethnicity, whatever. And I just fundamentally have, and I've also just opened my world so much to different types of cats that I fundamentally believe that we are one human race. And I ask you, do you believe that we are one human race?
I'm going to back up a little bit and come back to something that you said earlier.
Yeah.
I want to always correct people when they say, they brought the slaves over. The Africans were never slaves. We're enslaved.
I'm sorry. The Europeans looted Africa and brought them on against their will. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're never slaves, because you hear people, they say, you were slaves. No, we were never slaves. We were enslaved.
Very good. Very smart.
Yes. Incredibly, very different. Our humanity was taken away from us. Taken away from us. They wanted to take it away from us. So there's a big, there's a big difference. And also, what we see, European Christianity, that's what I like to call it. European Christianity was created for Europeans, right? And then they wanted to basically enforce that, onto the Africans, because we had a spiritual way of living, and we knew what nation we belonged to, which is this is a big subject for me, is that I honor each nation of people. I think each nation needs to honor their nation. And the African is a nation, the European people are a nation, the Chinese are a nation, the Asians are a nation, the East Indians are a nation of people. And instead of honoring each other's nations, we're looking to say, you need to mold and come to my way of being and living. And it's, and so that is what becomes an issue. And so are we one human race? Well, race doesn't exist.
Right, that's right.
Race does not exist.
That's right.
Humans, yes. Do we all belong to the same nation? No. We're all different nations. But are we humans? Yes.
Let me ask you something. So that's what I really meant to say. The word racism is not a good term in the sense that because I believe that we're all humanity, that what happens is I call it cultural bias. You're born into a certain family, into a certain nation or tribe, and no baby is learned to hate. No baby is comes out of the womb learning that there are people that are less human than others. So the culture from those nations are bias. And just the word, when you say race, when people say racism, do you think that's the appropriate word? Because like you said, there is no race.
Well, the word, it was made up, but because we've been using this thing now called race for the last 150 years or longer, it does give us a place for others and ourselves to understand what it is that we are speaking about. So these isms, like a racism, is basically, the race doesn't exist, but the actual racism in this culture that is predominantly being used, which is the European mythology of superiority. We have to use it so that we have a board to jump off from.
That's
in
right.
order for us to basically address what it is that we need to address so that we can bring substance to the issue and to the cause and problems of what is occurring for certain nations of people.
So let me ask you, where do we start insofar as trying to live in a more because it just seems to me there's corruption on so many, and I think that's the thing about Jamaica that we can talk about some other time, is that even within that pure island vibe, there still is a lot of corruption, and there still is a lot of I don't know, displacement. Would you say that's a fair statement?
I think I won't singular out Jamaican or Jamaica rather.
I just say because that's where you hail from. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the world has the world has deceived the people, and the people have been deceived by certain establishment of power. And because others have been deceived and they're desiring power, this false sense of power, they have fallen and they have deceived their people also, because they've fallen for the other nations who have basically deceived them and told them, if you behave a certain way and do this, we will give you power and we will give you favors. And human beings are filled with flaws, but they're also filled with great possibilities and potential.
That's right.
And what are we going to rise to? And we have the choice to rise to anything, any possibilities.
Do you think do you think that reparations is the place to start? I mean, I feel like as we talk right now, we are literally at some kind of tipping point, crossroads. And I agree that the youth is taking. They recognize that the future is here, and the old guard, a lot of the baby boomer generation, is still entrenched in this very sort of black and white aesthetic and obviously false narratives and just brainwashing. I mean, that's the point. Is that how would you start to unbrainwash people?
Well, I want to address what you asked before this latter part,
Yeah.
which is that you ask about reparation.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel that reparation is mandatory because there's a universal principle. And when you have done wrong to a nation of people and they have built your country on their lives and on their children's lives and continue, and others have benefited from their sweat and their blood. Universal principle says that you need to address this, otherwise your generations to come will have to pay in whatever form that means. And that's not me speaking, that's just universal principle. Other nations, the wrong that was made to them have been given reparations and will continue to get reparations maybe for the rest of their lifetimes. I see the Holocaust of the people of Eastern Europe and of Europe that has happened, and how the Germans will, for the rest of their life, be paying reparations, and how all people who choose to say that they belong to the European Jewish race can go back to Israel and their flights are paid for them and things are paid for them in order to go back and embrace all of that. They will forever be getting reparation. What has happened to the African nation who have built this country, and everybody knows that they've built this country, and they were here before all Europeans, and Europeans started to come over here and did not do anything, and they were given land and they were given resources to build their lives on the nation of Africans. There is something missing, and it has to be done because there is no rest, really, karmically and universally, until it has been addressed. So
you're right. That's that's spot on.
So it has to be addressed. Absolutely, 100% has to be addressed. Do I recommend that Black people put their lives on hold and in order for reparation? No, Black people are not putting their life on hold for reparation. They're like, yes, it needs to happen, it has to happen. But you know what? We don't need handout. We know who we are, and we are going to succeed even in the light of what has happened to us. We're moving forward. You know?
Anamika, can we do part 2 next week? I have so much more to talk to you about. We've been gone 95 minutes here though, and
really? Okay.
I could listen. Your voice is so healing, and what you say is, it's so right there, but can we do set 2 next week?
Sure, love to.
Beautiful. Well, I know that there are no coincidences in life, and I know that the divine has connected us, and I am very humbled to know you, and I appreciate you being vulnerable enough to come on my program and share your knowledge, and also because we talk about creating good dharma and karma in this life, so you don't have to come back and work on the same hang-ups that you have in this life, in the next life. But the point is that, I know that people will hear our creations, long after we've left this planet, and it will inspire people in a timeless way. And I think that that's just who you are anyway. You're just a timeless, mystical person. And I really am so honored to know you, and thank you for coming on and meeting me.
Oh, thank you, Jake. This was lovely, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share. And if it touches one person's life, then life feels full to me.
Absolutely. Well, we've been doing that in our own ways for years, and we know that that's the truth. But when you operate on the same frequency, even if you're doing it in different modalities, and the power is just that much greater. So bless you, my friend, and I look forward to continuing our creation together.
Well, have a beautiful rest of the day, Jake, and sending you much blessing, much love, and be well.
You too, my friend. Bless you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. So beautiful to connect with an amazing spirit and a woman who has learned to sit in the mess and glow, and her light is so strong and powerful, and is an inspiration to myself and so many others. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you later.